my best shot got me to the Mr. Universe, didn't win. But through that, it opened up to the door to the thing I was really destined to do, which was teach people about the benefits of quality nutrition, exercise, and a lifestyle that leads to health and vitality.
How you doing today?
Oh, rock and roll. I'm excited to have at it. So let's get into it.
We got a lot to get into, but let's get into it. Starting out talking about your bodybuilding career. And I want to go
Yeah.
back to the origin story of that and talk about how old were you at the time and what got you into that?
Three things happened to me in a very short period of time. One, my parents moved to a very rural area. It was 5 miles to my nearest neighbor, literally up a dirt road on a mountain where the telephone poles ended at my door, 50 miles from a town. So I was taken away from my friends and my kind of tribal group, whatever you want to call it, schooling, and spent a lot of time, 15 minutes sometimes on a snowmobile to get out to the road, then drive an hour to the bus. So my life changed a lot. I had a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time by myself. So that I wasn't happy about that, I might say, but it served a formative component. And I'll get to the next part of how that started. Second thing, my sister, who was 4 years my senior, was diagnosed with a Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer of the lymph nodes. I watched her go through the medical model before she died 4 years later at 22. And during that, I realized that your health isn't a guarantee, nor is your life a guarantee. And so that had a big impact on me. Third thing that happened is, and this all started in like a very short window of time. We moved there, she got diagnosed, and then she gave me a bodybuilding magazine that had Troy Zucolato, Mr. California, on the cover with two pretty bikini-clad girls on it, and driven mad at a testosterone and having a lot of time by myself. I'm like, maybe if I get some muscles. And I was a little scrawny, skinny guy. And so I went about building a gym in my barn and started training in that gym. And because I started training in that, I found and discovered Education of a Bodybuilder, which was a book by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And in that book, he said something that was really profound. He said to me, you could achieve anything you wanted in life if you had hard work, self-discipline, and a positive attitude. Now, everybody I knew worked hard. I worked hard. I was doing a manual labor job, cutting down trees, picking rocks, running tractors, grading roads, things like that. It was hard work. But no one had a positive attitude and self-discipline. What was that? And so I started applying those principles to be successful in bodybuilding. Because I had such lousy genetics, I started to, I had to do everything to get a little bit of muscle. So that led me to go to exercise physiology at the University of New Brunswick, which was kind of the background of the science that I required to understand the science of bodybuilding, as opposed to just the bro side of it, if you will. And then after that, I wasn't really happy with my education, because I would go to all my physiology professors and I would ask them questions related to building muscle, and they didn't really have good answers. They understood it, cellular chemistry or nervous system stuff, but they couldn't really answer my questions. And so I started seeking out mentors in different areas who were producing the results I wanted, and that led me through two concordant careers. One, I went to the nutrition industry, was into nutritional supplementation, managed a gym while I was working out. And then eventually I became a personal trainer and started, figuring these things out. And then, after 10 years, I won my very first contest, which was the Mr. New Brunswicks in Canada, which, interesting enough, my business partner today, Matt, who was 5 years my younger, he was competing in the juniors at that contest. We didn't know each other, but he remembers seeing me, and that was my big dream. The next year, and then I shortly afterwards, I hired Scott Abel, who was the best bodybuilding coach in Canada and maybe the world at the time. And I wish I had done that earlier, because I had so many, I thought I knew everything, but when I really got world-class coaching, the next 9 months transformed my physique more than anything else I had done. I went to the nationals for the first time, and realized at that point it was essentially, it was a drug race. It was who could tolerate taking the most amount of drugs with the least amount of side effects. Greg Kovacs was one of the guest posers. He was like 400 pounds at that time. I was next to him, and there was these other people, and backstage is like a match, and I was like, this is not why I got into the sport. And at that time, Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman were kind of the gods of the industry. And, I looked at Ronnie Coleman And I remember thinking, yeah, there's nothing I'm going to do to beat that guy. There's no amount of drug, no amount of training, no matter like I was able to realize. So I left the sport and opened up got a supplement contract in Vancouver, Canada, and started a little juice bar. Opened up a personal training operation and leveraged my credibilities as an athlete and built a business. And then a few years later, I got into meditation. And I read a book called The Holy Science. It said, hey, why don't you try a vegetarian based diet? And I said, okay, I'll try that and see what it goes to help your meditation. And I did that. And then I came up with this idea one day. Well, what would it be like if I was a drug free vegetarian bodybuilding champion? I don't know any of those. That'd be kind of an interesting thing. And 2 years later, I was standing on stage representing my country as the national champion at the Mr. Universe contest in Mumbai, India, which ironically was the epitome. So I achieved my lifetime goal. I didn't win the contest. I think I was 13th. And, but I got to the world championships. With my genetics, that was pretty good. But I did a little seminar for some kids that couldn't afford to go to the call. They were waiting outside the hotel. I don't know if I told this story. There was these kids coming to the hotel to see us, and they couldn't afford to go to. And it was at a polo stadium. It was like 30,000 people came to the show. I'd never been to a show that big. But these kids kept coming to the hotel, and they wanted to meet the bodybuilders. Wanted to meet the bodybuilders. And I talked to some of them, and I said, "Hey, are you coming to the show?" And they're like, "No, we didn't have the money." And I said, "Well, tell you what. After the competition, I'm going to go out to your gym, and I'll do a posing seminar, and I'll teach you guys some lifting stuff." And so every day there would be more and more kids coming back. They'd be waiting because it was all cordoned off from the police and everything around the hotel. And I'd come out and meet the kids. And so after the contest, I did that. And I went out, and there was about 200 or 300 people at this event. It was packed. The gym was full. The kids, the parents were like, the population there had none of it. It was in the slums of Mumbai where these kids were working out. And I put on this seminar. And I realized at that moment that the course of my bodybuilding career wasn't about me becoming Mr. Universe or Mr. Olympia or those things. It was about to take what I learned about the performance of exercise and nutrition and inspire the next generation to maximize those things without destroying their lives. And so I got back from that. I gained a whole bunch of weight because some of the things I did didn't work out. I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. Met a doctor by the name of Dr. Michael O'Brien. He taught us about nutrition from the inside out, enzymes, probiotic, digestive stuff. I went on a $1,500 a month supplementation program, went to a raw food diet, cleaned up everything, got my health back, got my vitality back, hit a new level. Matt and I started a business. We started coaching athletes around the world. We coached 15,000 people from every walk of life over the next 4 years. From that, I extracted the principles that we're going to get into today about how to build muscle, burn body fat, and maintain a healthy lifestyle. Look good, perform well, and have great health, which was my original goal when I was 15. It got sidetracked in the performance and the aesthetic ideals in bodybuilding, which had certain consequences, which you can talk about later. When we came full circle, and that education company then eventually morphed into BiOptimizers, which is a biological optimization company. And now we're known as one of the premier brands in the biohacking community of unique ways to provide real world solutions to the challenges and for the aspirations of people who want to master looking good, performing well, and more importantly, being healthy.
Wow, there's a lot there we can get into. Thank you for giving a great overview of your story. So to come back, let's take it back to the beginning of that story and talk about that move. You mentioned becoming Mr. New Brunswick. So were you 15 at the time, moved from one part of New Brunswick more in the city to the outskirts?
We went from a village, which was about 20 minutes outside a city called Moncton, New Brunswick, which is about 100,000 people in the greater Moncton area. And my village might have had 2 or 3,000, to a village of me, my sister, my dad, and my mother. There was a place called New Ireland, which was a settlement close to the Fundy National Park, which was about 5 miles out to the little fishing village by the Fundy National Park. and that, and 35 miles away from my village and 55 miles away from the city. So yeah, it was extreme rural.
And coming back to getting that magazine from your sister where this whole bodybuilding thing started, what do you think was her inspiration for giving you that magazine? Was it something, she just had lying around and passed it over to you, or was she trying to inspire you in a way?
I've never been asked that question. It's a great question. You know, I'm a big believer in spirituality. I studied it and I've meditated on it a lot, and I've often thought why my sister, who her and I were born essentially with the same genetics, same environment, um, she had massive health issues, obviously, that took her life at the age of 22. And despite a whole lot of things that I would say would be very unhealthy that I've experimented with in my life, I've been able to achieve robust levels of health. And I look at that and it doesn't make logical, reasonable, or rational sense. And so, therefore, I believe there are factors outside of the realm of our cognitive capacity. And some people believe in destiny. Some people say they don't believe in it because it doesn't have choice. But I believe that there was something inside her that, if you could say, knew that I needed to see that to get inspiration to kind of go down that pathway. Maybe that was something she felt about her own health. You know, she wanted me to avoid that. Maybe it was a point of inspiration that she wanted to get me to. I really don't know what it was, but I took it, I ran with it, and it's shaped the course of my life. So I believe it was a karmic destiny kind of piece. And I sometimes think that maybe, karmically she took on my own misgivings of this life or my own, misadventures of this life as her own life.
You mentioned her passing at age 22. Where were you at in your bodybuilding journey at that point?
I had just was my first semester of university. So I had actually started out in computer science, interesting enough. And I got accepted into the computer science program and quickly realized that I would never be a computer programmer, even though they told us that was going to be the future. Interesting enough, I run an internet marketing company, so that's kind of funny. So there was some right thinking in that methodology. I just realized that I wasn't going to be the guy running the programs. But I quickly, the first 2 weeks, I realized I'm not going to cut it as a programmer. And I actually switched faculties. I pulled a little maneuver at the university by telling one dean, the dean of computer science, that I had been accepted into the exercise physiology department or kinesiology department, and then he could sign off the papers for my course transfers. And then I went to the dean of the phys ed department and said, "Hey, look, my dean over here has recommended me for these things and have signed off the papers." And so I did some finagling with their assistants and transferred kind of, I kind of worked the system a little bit to get in there. And once I joined the classes, which, I didn't know that you could be a personal trainer. I didn't know you could build a nutritional supplement company. I just knew that I loved that area and I didn't love programming. And so I realized that I needed to follow what I love because I had no chance of being good at something I hated. So maybe I could be good at this. And the only thing that I knew I was good at sports and I liked training and I liked studying those things. And so that had the biggest chance. And I think that's something everybody should consider. Look, the world's best yo-yo person makes a great income playing with yo-yos. There is always room for prosperity when you embrace excellence at anything, regardless of how obtuse or weird a subject might be. And there's nothing weirder than bodybuilding. You're standing up on stage in a set of posing trunks under glaring lights of the most judgmental crowd in the world. Someone's something on stage at 9% body fat, and they're like, "Oh, that guy's fat," or that guy's got no peak on his bicep. Like, it's a brutal. If you can handle that, you can handle anything. So
Would you say, Wade, that a catalyst for making that switch at that time in university was her death and realizing, life is short and I need to change my trajectory and make sure I'm spending my time wisely doing something I love?
100%. I'll share something very personal. And thank you for asking me this. I very seldom get into this line of questioning. But before she died at home, and she used to sleep in my bed because my bed was better for her than the one that she had. And after she died, she died on December 21st. I remember it's the shortest day of the year. And after her death, I remember she would have been bedridden for months. And so I would lie in the same bed that she was and had one little window looking out. And I remember thinking to myself, this is where she spent the last part of her life, looking out that window. And she'd have good days after treatment sometimes. And, she'd be down for a couple weeks, and then she'd get her in a wheelchair. And I used to take her out shopping, and we'd go out for a day or two, and she'd be wiped out for a week afterwards. And so I used to lie in that bed, and I'd look out there and I'd go, you know, what would my sister give to have one more day, one more week, one more run down the field? She was a super athlete. She had been accepted into Royal Officer military training. She was a bush survival. She was second in Canada as an air bush survival training pilot. She was in the air cadets and things like that. And so she was a phenomenal athlete. She was way better athlete, way stronger than me. And so it was interesting to see she had all these gifts, but had the health issues, and I was the opposite. I seemed to be able to survive anything, but didn't have the athletic gifts. And I thought, I will never live a life where I don't take chances, don't take risks, don't try new things, don't go on the adventure, don't take the trip across the world, don't roll the dice of my entire career on one move. And I've done that. And it's led to a lot of ups, a lots of downs, but an extraordinary rich array of experiences. And I don't believe it would have been that way had my sister not got sick and had not happened. And so I think as we get older or we get closer to the end of this life, and you start to realize, especially you get into your 40s and 50s, and you're just like, I don't know how much longer time I got here. You start making decisions, I think, a little bit more of, hey, I want to get as much out of this as possible. Because of being exposed to that at a very formative age, you're still forming yourself as an adult. I realized I started acting that way when I was 18 years old. And that totally changed the trajectory of my life. And I lived I would say, somewhat unusual life. I didn't buy into a lot of the things that people buy into because they didn't make any sense to me.
Silver lining in a very tough and sad situation.
It's just like recently, Francis Ngannou just won the heavyweight championship of the world in the UFC, and he comes from Cameroon, and he was working in a sand mine at 10 years old with rocks falling down and killing people because the men wouldn't work there. And he was very poor and he had all these challenges. But these hardships, the overcoming of these extraordinary conditions that are he was left in the Sahara Desert 7 times. So my life is relatively easy compared to someone such as his, and he's been able to rise to heights even greater. So I think that in today's world, I think you're going to get put to the test regardless. The key is not to develop a victim mentality. It is to say that the challenges are the invitation from divinity to access the greatness within ourselves. And I think if you look at that way, um, it adds a richness to life, and it adds a primacy to your own capacity to develop your own skills and abilities, as opposed to saying, well, I can't do it. I wasn't born in the right family. I didn't have the right teaching. I didn't have the right education. I didn't know better. My parents were bad. There's a million reasons why you can say to fail on anything, but there's no reason why you can't give your best shot, because sometimes, my best shot got me to the Mr. Universe, didn't win. But through that, it opened up to the door to the thing I was really destined to do, which was teach people about the benefits of quality nutrition, exercise, and a lifestyle that leads to health and vitality.
You never know how it's going to all pan out, eh?
I believe that if you give everything that you got with everything that you do, um, the doors will open up to you in ways that you oftentimes don't imagine.
I hear you. So you mentioned coming across this meditation book along your journey there. What was the book again, and how did you stumble across it?
Well, the first book I came across was the autobiography of a yogi written by Paramahansa Yogananda. It was given to me by a friend. And it was great because it resolved all my issues with organized religion. He was a Hindu mystic that was the first yogi to live in the West. And he spoke about the unification of all different religions. The essential nature was the same, and said he taught a pathway where you could discover the presence of divinity within yourself. And I was like, hey, that sounds like a good idea, because I didn't like what the guy was telling me down the street of the church. I wasn't quite sure of what I was interpreting from the books that I was reading. So I was like, hey, there's an inner world to this. Okay, let me try that. So I did, and I started to see results. And then he had his teacher, his guru, as it's called in India, was a guy by the name of Swami Teswar, and he wrote a book called The Holy Science, which is perhaps the most succinct book I've ever read in my entire life. It, it does a comparison analysis between Christianity as taught by Jesus and Hinduism as taught by Krishna. And in these two, he'd use a line out of each book and then he would relate it. So he said, where are we in the universe? What is the goal of life? What is the process? And what is the obstacles? And then what is the revelation that comes from transcending the obstacles? In 100 pages in his tiny book. And one of the areas he talks about is right dwelling, right vocation, in life, about finding these things are an essential component. And he talked about the dietary process, the nervous system, the development of the teeth in the body, the length of the intestinal tract, the nervous system response mechanisms would indicate what was the right type of food through people. And it was a very compelling case. And so he made a case that humans would best suit it by being what he called frutivores, which were related to fruits and plants and vegetables, because of those conclusions. And I thought, this was about a radical statement as you could get to a bodybuilder's eating meat all the time and all that sort of. Come on, man. I'm like, well, hey, I'll give it a try for 2 weeks. What do I got to lose? So I did. Felt good. Tried it for 2 weeks more. Said, okay, well, let me do it for another month. I did it for another month. 2 months went by. I said, I guess I just won't eat meat anymore. So for me, that worked. It doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. And I just never looked back. So it wasn't like I'm not a vigilante vegan or I'm not into all these things. And I made all kinds of mistakes and tried to figure out performance side. I forgot to tell you in her story, after 4 years of coaching all those people, I made a comeback, won 2 more national titles and went to the world championships again, placed fifth, but didn't have the breakdown, didn't have the brain fog, didn't have the joint pain, didn't have the weight gain after. So I was able to hit both aesthetics, performance, and health to the best of my ability. And at that point, I started taking the message forward. And so I learned from my mistakes. They were, you fail on the experiments, but you don't fail to learn. And I think that's an important part. And, if you don't get too hung up on the outcomes about things, you get process oriented. You just see the outcome as a result, and not better or for worse.
So, getting into the vegetarian diet thing a little bit deeper, when do this reading, come across this way of eating and embrace it, is it for health benefits at the time, or what are you specifically trying to achieve?
The goal from his perspective was that he felt that undigested proteins, particularly from animal proteins, would get potentially lodged in the intestinal tract. And your intestinal tract also, like every other part of your body, has innervation factors from your nervous system. They go to different parts of your intestinal tract, innervate through your spine and up into the brainstem. And he said any tension inside the body, whether it was internally or externally from sensory disruption, would cause micro fluctuations inside the brain. And so the goal about having this diet was for no benefit other than to be able to retain a calm, centered state in one's mind in order to hit higher states of meditative performance. That was the reason. Wasn't to be a bodybuilder, it wasn't to be an athlete. It was just all about making your brain work better. So I said, okay, well, I'll try that. I mean,
Was that specifically a benefit you noticed right away?
Yeah, so one thing that I noticed, I was a very aggressive guy by nature, and that was concordant with all my family. Most of my family members used it in a destructive way. I used I would say my anger, my aggressiveness to channel into my training. So rather than, getting into street fights and stuff, which was quite common, and I was a doorman for a while, so I had my share of that sort of environment, and I don't recommend it, especially today because now everybody's a UFC fighter. So some guy 145 pounds, he'll just destroy a guy, 6'2", 250. So you can't tell what's going on. His size doesn't really matter as much as it used to with training techniques, but I did notice a down regulation in my aggressiveness and um, my tendency for discord. I'm a contrarian thinker by nature. That's my, I see what's going on in the world, and I'm not so convinced that that's the way to go. I'm more than happy to go the opposite way. That's just in my psychological makeup. That's caused problems inside of institutions, authoritative institutions that I didn't believe in, school and governments and things like that. But it's also led this, carefree adventure. So I did find there was some regulation inside of that. And I do believe that it assisted me in certain meditation practices, although there was some mistakes that I made. And later on, I started to add things like essential fatty acids and stuff, which seemed to improve cognitive function to areas that were gapping in my diet prior to.
And was this the first time along your journey you'd done all the bodybuilding and such to that point? And obviously, if you're doing resistance training in a healthy way, that can be additive to, health and well-being. But was health and well-being something that came across your radar before that point? Or were you just bodybuilding to be big and to compete? Or was health and wellness a concern? Or was that the first
It was
taste of it?
yeah, great question. It was always a concern. However, I made the classic mistake that I think most people do. And the classic mistake was this: we associate aesthetic ideas. So the Instagram model, the cover of the magazine, the athlete on the NFL, physical aesthetics or physical performance, and we associate that with health. And the reality is, it's fitness is a component of health, but it's not the whole picture. And going back to Dr. O'Brien, when I had my worst, like lowest moment in my career after the Mr. Universe, I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. I'm 42 pounds over my weight, 3 months before. And I went to him and I said, Dr. O'Brien, what did I not figure out? Like, I don't get it. I've got the best coach in the world. I've got discipline. I got a positive attitude. I've worked really hard. I spent my whole life, my career to get here, and I'm a physical wreck. He said, I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to teach you how to build the body from the inside out, not the outside in, which you learned. So my whole concept was turned outside down because I thought if I could squat this much weight, have this much body fat, have this much cardiovascular capability, I was quote unquote healthy. And my crash and burn after the Mr. Universe, which is the aesthetic idea of society, this is the pinnacle of what it is. I recognized that no, I wasn't. And then having coached the who's who in periods of my life, famous people, cover models, fitness competitors, bodybuilding champions, people who achieved that, you start to realize is that no, those are performance based endeavors, which are related to aesthetics. Has nothing to do with health. Lance Armstrong won 7 world championships and developed testicular cancer. The average NFL football player career who has a high level of fitness lasts 3.5 years. Most athletes are out of the sport by 35 because they're not able to perform at the high level. No athletic endeavor is healthy. Most of the Hollywood elite are using a cornucopia of chemicals to maintain a certain aesthetic ideas, often to the detriment of their mental, physical, and emotional health. So the icons of what are represented in magazines, like Troy Zuclato on that cover, was he healthy? No. He was a bodybuilding champion, which was he had achieved components. Was Was Lance Armstrong healthy even though he had a VO2 max better than anybody else? No, he was able to perform. You know, was Shannon Sharp in the peak of his career healthy as the number one tight end in the world at the time? No, he was just a physical specimen and a great athlete. Shannon Sharp today in his 50s is probably healthier than he was then. Troy Zaccato is probably healthier than he was in his bodybuilding career, and I bet you Lance Armstrong is healthier than he was after the sport. And so our company focuses on 3 areas: aesthetics, performance, and ideals. I don't want to discount aesthetics. We all want to look attractive and be our best, but we don't want to do it at the consequence of our health.
Let's come back to Mr. Marshmallow. I want to get into the specifics of
Yeah,
why that happened. Let's talk about, you're at your peak of fitness and all of a sudden I think you said within 3 months you put on 42 pounds and it's not good weight. So what was it that happened at that time?
great question. So what happened is two things. When I switched to become a plant-based bodybuilder, you have to realize nobody had done it. There were no plant-based proteins. Uh, my coach said this wasn't possible. You can't go. He's like, you're not going to win the national championships. You're not going to go to the Mr. Universe as a vegetarian with no drugs. I said, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to attempt the impossible. I just need you to coach me on your side of it and we'll do the best we can. He said, okay. He says, well, in that case, will you take whey protein? And in the dietary recommendations that was advented, it said that you could use milk proteins as a substitute for other types of protein. So I did. Now, at that time, whey protein was pretty cheap, not that well developed, probably not that good for you. And a lot of protein, this whey protein falls under it. There's really good stuff, and then there's a lot of me too poor products. And I didn't have the distinction of what was, or we didn't even have availability of what was really good. So I use that to augment my diet. The other thing is, over the course of 2 years, I spent 6 months the first year, and the second year, 11 months on an extremely restricted performance based diet that was primarily developed for people who were using anabolic enhancements, which is most bodybuilders. So they were running a diet where they're using low fat, simple carbohydrates, and high amounts of protein to drive insulin in combination with exorbitant amounts of testosterone and anabolic hormones that they were using in order to achieve a certain physical result, to grow muscles, maximum possible lose body fat. And it's a very precise science. So I was following a similar type motion, although I wasn't. Most of Scott's athletes were using animal-based proteins, real food. I was using whey protein to hit my protein contents in order to stabilize my blood. That was a disaster. And usually you would only stay in shape for maybe 4 to 6 months. But that last round where I had won my Western Canadians and then I won the national championship. So literally from January to July, I was on a diet, but then the world championships weren't to November. So I stayed in contest condition literally for the last 6 months. And for people that don't understand, when you're doing a cover shoot, like the guys on Men's Fitness and the guys on, Muscle, you're only in that shape for maybe a week that you can maintain that. 2 weeks at most, 3 weeks. Unless you're genetically advantaged in certain areas, it's very hard to stay at that level for any length of time and certainly isn't healthy to do so. Well, I did. And there was a major, major problem with that. So what had happened is after I went off the Mr. Universe contest, my blood sugar was out of control. Okay. I couldn't stop eating. My metabolism was in the toilet from staying on that so much. In fact, so much the level of exhaustion from the training I had experienced and the pain that I was in during that last 6 months was so extreme. My coach says, you can't even work out for the next 3 months. You just need to recover your nervous system. Like you don't even know how shredded you are, like how messed up you are. And he was right. But more importantly, we didn't understand digestive science. We didn't understand the importance of enzymes. We didn't understand the importance of developing probiotics for your body so that you could metabolize and utilize the food you were doing. And that's what Dr. O'Brien, who the doctor I met, who taught me about all that. And when I applied his applications to it, I switched my diet. I went to a raw food diet. And I started introducing intestinal cleansers. I started fasting. I started entering all these herbs and putting in probiotics and wiping out the bad guys, putting in the good guys, cleaning out my colon. So it was a remarkable transformation. Now, what I didn't tell in that story is by year 2 on that program, there were some challenges in that. I felt that my muscle mass was starting to go down because once I got off the protein supplementation, I was like, well, how do I do this? And that's when we came out with our first enzyme product, because I knew I was only eating 85 grams of protein a day. It really wasn't enough to support my muscle gains. So we developed a proteolytic enzyme blend so we could extract more amino acids out of what I was getting to augment my performance. And that turned my training into turbocharged. And over the next 2 years, I was able to get the gains that I needed to come in better than I had gone 4 years before. So in 2007, I was a better bodybuilder than I was in 2003. I was bigger, I was more muscular, I was healthier, I was happier. And it was after that event, I retired again. I said, okay, we figured this out. I've got this figured out. Now I need to teach people because, everybody thought I was crazy. And even today, it's been almost 14, 15 years later, people are like, they're still shocked that I was able to do it. And I was able to do it because I was doing these other things. And proteolytic probiotics came along. We introduced those. And so my ability to extract the amino acids out of my protein is far superior to someone who's eating 2 or 3 times the amount of protein that I'm consuming that doesn't have those agents. And so that's my unfair advantage, if you will.
Talk more about the physiology of how that works.
So, I'm a classically trained nutritionist. And the ironic thing about almost every nutritional book that you read is there'll be a couple of paragraphs early on in the book, usually talking about the role of enzymes required with every single transmission. So you need enzymes to get your protein to get your minerals, and minerals to get your vitamin. That is the chain of digestion, absorption, and utilization, which goes through essentially 5 stages of digestion. But enzymes are very interesting agents. They accelerate chemical transitions inside the body. They make the body run more efficiency. They are the difference between the living and the dead. They're the difference between stones, plants, and people is the amount of enzymatic capacity. Stones have no enzymatic capacity. Plants have some. People have a lot. In the human body, there's over 25,000 different enzymatic reactions that go in the body. Now, here's the part where I think is worth investigating. There was a guy by the name of Dr. Edward Howe back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And he wrote a book called Enzyme Nutrition and Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity. And he ran a bunch of experiments. The first experiments were done by a famous experience called Pottinger, who did these cats. And he fed one set of cats a raw food diet, one set of cats a cooked food diet. And by the 3rd generation, they just had all these problems with the cats. So then Dr. Howe took those experiments and he did it on rats, he did it on rabbits, he did it on monkeys, he did it on dogs, he did it on all these different species. He fed one group no enzymes, one group a raw food diet, and one group a diet enhanced with enzymes. The group that had the enzyme deficient diet by 3rd generation lost the ability to procreate, showed weird sociological behavior, right? And had a massive advent of genetic-based diseases. The animals that were fed their regular raw food diet lived longer, didn't have the genetic diseases, stayed in the same social stuff. The ones that were augmented with enzymes lived longer than any of the groups and replicated at a higher level and seemed to have a healthier lifestyle than all 3 of them. So therefore, he came to the conclusion that if you had an enzymatically rich diet, that then got everybody to kind of jump onto with like the Paul Braggs and all that groups. They started jumping onto these ideas of raw food diets. And I did a raw food diet for 2 years. But the problem is with the raw food diet is our raw food diets today still aren't rich in enzymes and probiotics because we've altered the food production and distribution over the last 80 years. So now we have food crops that have degenerated, food mineralizations, lack of enzymes, then the advent of chemicalization on herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, preservatives, dyes. All of these things disrupt our enzymatic activity inside the body. So not only are we not getting enough of these enzymes, which are essential in the breakdown of our foods into the energy units or building blocks of the body. And you talk to your doctor and says, well, your body makes enzymes. That's true. But when it makes enzymes, it has to uh, convert proteins out of smooth muscle or striated muscle, convert those into digestive enzymes at huge metabolic cost. And that's why after turkey dinner, you have all this food, second helpings, pie, grandma's apple pie, whatever. What happens after? You've eaten your daily caloric limit and then some usually. Do you go out and run a marathon? Do you go out and lift weights? No. You at best you sprint to the couch or the floor or the rocking chair and everybody passes out and starts drooling. Well, why? Because the enzymes to run your brain, the enzymes to run your muscles are being shunted, converted, and used by your body to digest that massive meal that you just had. And so, as we continually put food into our bodies, because humans are the only species on the planet which cooks, irradiates, and pasteurizes foods, which uh, kill off the enzymes and probiotics, which are essential in order to break down, digest, absorb, and utilize that food. But what happens if you do this over generations? Well, Dr. Howell predicted in the 1940s that humans in 3 generations would show weird sociological behavior. They would start having a massive advent of genetic based diseases, and they would lose the ability to procreate, which is the exact condition that we find all of ourselves in the industrialized world across the world. Interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. I'm curious, going to your diet journey again. Were you vegetarian for a period of time before the raw food diet?
Yes. So I became a vegetarian literally 20 years this July. I did that experiment. And so I was a vegetarian for 2 years. As I said, I was applying what I call a meat eating mentality to a vegetarian diet. And keep in mind, I was supplementing my protein, what I thought were my protein requirements with whey protein. So it wasn't a full vegan or anything like that. Then when I met Dr. O'Brien, I went 2 years on a completely raw food diet, which I think was great from a detoxification perspective. I think most people would benefit for maybe 3 months or 6 months of that. I think it's really good at detoxifying the pathways and resensitizing your sensory observation points. You get very sensitive to a lot of things in food. But after 2 years, I found that there were social complications with a raw food diet. You're always the weird guy at every event. Social occasion become trouble. Food prep is difficult, and I think there's limitations within that dietary practice for many people in application of the real world. If you're living in a warm climate, uh, access to natural, organic, tropical sources of food, you can do fermentation and stuff like that. I think it can be a great diet for people. For most people today, it's almost unsustainable, and so today I probably eat 60, I would say in the colder months, 60% raw food and 80% raw food in the warmer months. And so, and the rest is whatever. And I don't have to worry about the social constraints or whatever. And I'll have a little bit of cheese. Sometimes I like to go out for pizza, you know, and maybe I'll have an ice cream on a Saturday night or something, because I still like all that stuff. I'm not like some holier than thou health guru that's saying thou shalt do this and that. No, no, live your life, have a great time, enjoy the fun things of life, but as long as it's balanced by a sensible diet over the long term, I think you're in good shape.
Got it. I had lost the timeline there a little bit. So it was the vegetarian on the whey protein, the crash, and then the doctor
Yes,
helping you with the raw food. Pull yourself
yes,
back out of that. Got it.
yeah. So from 2001 to 2003, the start of 2004, that's so literally it was just a little over 2.5 years on a lacto vegan diet. Then I went full raw food vegan for 2 years. And then from there, I went to, I would say, a lacto ovo vegetarian diet. So I'll have eggs occasionally. I'll have dairy products occasionally. I don't have the A1 inflammatory protein problem that a lot of people do. So I digest that food okay. So I'm good. And then I have enzymatic offerings that support all of those diets, even ketogenic diets. So I'm dietary agnostic. Do the diet that works for you.
And if it wasn't for you talked about the social aspect and how it can be difficult with the raw food diet, Do you think if that wasn't the case and you were able to, sustain that diet long term, you would be healthier because of the increase in enzymes you'd have?
Um, it's hard to say. It's hard to say because I think that every diet that we have one for, whether it's paleo or keto or vegan or, you know, carnivore, whatever the diet, you have to realize there's a couple of matriculations, and Matt and I are working on a massive book on this right now because we've had so much experience in diets and diets philosophies and strategies and pros and cons. And he's a ketogenic guy, I'm a plant-based guy, so we've been at war for 20 years, so it's funny speaking. But we look at the opposite, what seem to be opposites with us, as advantage points, because I can learn about the advantages that his diet offers. He can learn about the advantages of my doctors, and then we can develop principles which are concordant with both of them, with variance for genetic individuality. So whenever you're looking at a diet, you have to look at who is the person at this time and what is their mid short-term goals, their midterm goals, and their long-term goals. Then you have to look at what, like what's the state of being and what is the diet that they're going to be able to stay on for any length of time. And so for Matt, for him, the ketogenic diet is more supportive for his psychology, his physiology, and he really likes it. To me, I struggle with that diet. It doesn't work that well for me. So I can use the benefits of it. I can get the principles of it, and I can extract that. What I've learned from the ketogenic diet is I need to pay close attention to the types of fats that I'm using in my life, which might not be as present in a plant-based diet. And for him, he recognizes the importance of introducing carbohydrates and fiber on a weekly basis in order to keep digestive distress building up, because the ketogenic diet can be very impactful in the sense that a lot of people suffer from constipation and things like that. And then both of us agree that kind of a paleo philosophy is that the closer to natural foods that you can get, that you're going to find probably the best results. So looking at, I call those the three primary dietary philosophies: paleo, plant-based, and keto. And then there's derivatives, extreme keto being maybe carnivore diet, extreme plant-based would be raw food, right? And then the paleo is kind of the components of both of those diets that is most supported. Is it better to eat wild game than farm-raised food? Probably. Is it better to eat wildcraft, organic, natural food products than, factory farmed carbohydrates? Probably. Is it better to get non-genetically modified essential fatty acids from your food as opposed to, canola oil, which would classify as vegetarian? Absolutely. So what you want to look at is what are the concordant components of all of those diet derivatives. Strip away all the division, and you realize that about 80% of it makes the sense. It's concordant. So let's start with the 80% rule, and then let's make those adaptations, and let's use biohacking technology, blood sugar regulation. Let's look at your SpectraCell, your vitamins and minerals, and your uptake and absorption. Let's look at your genetics, your epigenetics. Let's test for your unfolded proteins in your heart. And now we can address, from a health longevity, we can address all those issues with 5 simple tests and a DEXA scan. Now now we know if this diet's working, or we know if there's holes in my diet. So my discoveries early in my career I just pushed something to the extreme, put the pedal to the metal until something blew. And then it was like, okay, back, bring the crash thing back to the shop. Let's get a mechanic that can put this thing back together and put together. So the level of feedback was horrific and damaging in myself. I just happened to be an extreme guy that went that way. Nowadays, I can much more refine those because the technology and the information and the expertise is available thanks to the internet, which wasn't available back then. And so that's changed the game. And I think that everybody should take a look at their diet philosophy and pick a lane, try it, do the biofeedback, and then try another one, and then try another one, and then learn about yourself, and then optimize your diet. Because the only thing that matters is N of one. And anytime that we're talking on a podcast, or you see an expert or someone who wrote a New York Times bestseller, they're giving you general applications of universal principles that you can apply in your life to give you a base point. But to really hit your ultimate level, you're going to need professionals to help you interpret data for you, and you're going to need some kind of feedback loop so that you can start to adjust on the fly. And that's what biohacking or biological optimization is all about, is tightening the feedback cycle so that you make adjustments before you crash and burn like I used to have to learn from.
Let's stick on the crash and burn here a little bit and talk about, do you have any long-term repercussions of living that way where you push it pedal to the metal and crash and have issues, and then obviously you'd go through a repair and a regenerate. But like these days, doing that and being in such an extreme sport, bodybuilding, like that is in and of itself very extreme on the body. Is there certain things that you're still dealing with today from using your body so aggressively?
You know, I've been very lucky. I forgot to add that I had a stint with extreme abuse of narcotics in there as well after my bodybuilding career before I came back as a vegetarian and discovered meditation. So there were damages that were certainly done to my body during those years. Um, the one I've repaired, I think all of them. Um, so there was disruption of the myelin sheath on my body fat, which was very hard on my nervous system. I think I had skin issues from hormonal dysregulation for a period of time. I used Chinese medicine to overcome that. I had digestive distress from the stupid amounts of whey protein that I was using. Um, I had, I think, cognitive degeneration, which I was able to correct through neurofeedback and the use of essential fatty acids and colloidal minerals. So almost all of the things I've been able to repair and regenerate over the period of years. The one thing that I do believe, which is probably a psychological or a psychophysiological anchoring, and that is in 2003. You have to keep in mind, I got my body fat so lean. I was down around 3% body fat, which is below healthy levels. It's great for performance. So my ability to stay competitive on that stage was to get my body fat at a level lower than anybody else. I would just show up more ripped than everybody. So that would overcome some of the size disadvantages. So I have better symmetry between the muscles and lower body fat, which are two of the parameters. And that was my advantage. I'm going to diet harder and longer and just show up in better shape than everybody else. But the consequence of that 6 months staying at that, literally just, I had to put extra, just to give you an idea, I had to put two sets of insoles in the bottom of my shoes because the fat pads on the bottom of my feet were depleted and would hurt to walk on my bones. Okay, that's and you're eating and you can see all the fibers in your muscle in your face as you're chewing your food. This is extreme levels, and there's dangers in going to the extremes. Every time my body fat gets down into the single digit level, I notice there is a trigger for me to want to start eating or go unconscious in my eating or eat foods that are not normal successfully in my diet. And I'm going through a steady state process right now because I want to do that. And then I've hired a hypnotherapist because I do believe there is a psycho emotional trauma that gets activated when my body fat hits below a certain set point that goes, you're going into that danger zone again. Don't do that. That would be the one thing that I think has retained with me since that time.
And when you finally retired from bodybuilding and you had, spent all those years so big and ripped and obviously not from a health perspective, but from, physique and appearance perspective, I'm sure you enjoyed that. Was it hard to, go from being that big to quote unquote being a regular layperson again? Like, what was that transition like on you psychologically?
Yeah, great question. So nobody's asked me these questions, so I love this line of thinking. Thank you. I would say the biggest adjustment was in 1998. Prior to that, because from um, 1996 to 1997, a little bit of over a period of 2 years, I used 5 cycles of anabolic steroids at that time, and I got really big. So I was at 230 pounds with veins in my abs. Like I'm 5'8" on a great day. And when I made the adjustment to the natural, there was about a year of getting over. When you use anabolics, they're not addictive physiologically, but they're definitely addictive psychologically, because particularly for males, that super high levels of testosterone has kind of a euphoric effect. Your confidence and how you're feeling, and the that for men who've gone through male menopause and had testosterone drop, there's a I don't quite feel like myself feeling. Well, it's the opposite when you're on that program. You're just like, I'm Iron Man, I can do anything. It's a great feeling. So when you come off it, there's a depression of all that for, anywhere from 3 months to a year. And the first year was a big adjustment. Um, then the second phase is coming out of that 2003 and gaining all that weight. I had never been overweight in my life. So that was shocking. I'm a personal trainer. I'm an ad coach. I'm the man for this stuff. But now I'm suffering from the same conditions. So the good news is it activated empathy and compassion for people who are struggling with that, because I knew exactly how they felt. The second thing, though, I was like, well, wait a second. That pain motivated me to figure out a better way, because I knew that if I taught this to my students, they were going to run into the same problem that I did. And so if you look at most athletic careers, they're over at 35. Why? Because the physical body can't keep up to the performance-based diet and training. So I was like, I need to come up with a better way. So I made the first attempt. We did, we did that 2003 thing, and then I figured it out over the next 4 years. It took me to kind of master that program. When I went back to the world championships, I would say I had transcended the 15-year-old boy that wanted to look like the guy on the cover. And we were in Thessaloniki, Greece at the World Championships with Team Canada. And I can remember this like it was because all my competitors are, you're standing on stage and you're all smiling, looking great, and you feel like garbage. Um, but I felt great because my program was great. And I didn't worry about what I was doing or anything. And when we got to Greece, we were looking for a restaurant to eat in between the morning show and the afternoon show. And you can imagine these depleted, dehydrated, strung out, tanned bodybuilders wandering through the streets of Thessaloniki, Greece, trying to find a restaurant that will support their diets where they can get some chicken and rice or whatever. So I go in, sit down in this wonderful Greek restaurant, and this guy comes up and he brings this big thing of bread to the table. And I haven't eaten bread in years. And it just dawned on me. I've transcended this. It doesn't matter what happens. And I took a big piece of the bread and I put some butter on it and I took a big bite of that. And this is a total no-no as a competitor. They're staring at me. What are you doing? And then I said, he goes, you guys want anything to drink? I'm like, yeah, give me one of those beers. And I had a beer. And then he brought this big chunk of feta cheese, like about this thick, and this like like a huge chunk of cheese. He puts that on. I start eating the cheese. He's excited. He brings over these other things, like we're having this Greek salad and olives and feta cheese and bread, and I'm drinking beer. And then he brings out this. Then the piece de resistance. He brings out this tiramisu cake, and I'm just cutting a big slab of it. My team are losing their minds. How could you possibly be doing this on the world's biggest competition? But I had transcended the competition. I had transcended my goals because I realized that it wasn't about me winning a trophy or winning a championship or whatever it happens to be. It was about me mastering my physiology for excellence, but not being attached to that externalization of that. And since that time, I've never had to worry about it. I mean, I love working out. You know, I stay between 190 and 200 pounds right now at 5'8", so I still carry a lot of muscle. I'm almost 50 years old. I work out 4 or 5 days a week, and I do it because I like the process of lifting. But do I care if I'm, shredded at 3%? Nah.
What was it like going back after having that big meal and gorging on all that delicious food? What was it like performing that afternoon?
It's total euphoria because I was watching myself in the contest. I was not in the contest. I was watching myself in the contest and completely amused by the whole endeavor. I thought it was, you know, it was a very profound moment for me. I think from a spiritual perspective, from a performance perspective, it was just, yeah, I did this. I did it in a way that nobody said was possible. I'm not concerned about, I mean, and I came fifth in that contest. The top one and two guys, it didn't matter what I did. They were going to beat me. They were just superior athletes in every way possible. Like genetic, muscle development, conditioning, didn't matter. Between third place and eighth place, we you could have interchanged any one of us a little bit here because the margin for error is very small at the world championship level. The difference between first and last is a percentage maybe. So I had just I had just gotten out of the grind of that. My my success wasn't determined by any group of judges. It wasn't determined by my teammates. It wasn't determined by a body fat percentage. It wasn't determined by any external quantitative factor. My experience, my success was determined by the a way that I felt, my emotional awareness and happiness and joy that I was experiencing. And not that not having those things isn't important, because I think it's great as an expression, as an artist. I saw bodybuilding as an art form for me. Can I chisel my muscle this way? Can I do this? Can I work on this amazing machine and do things to make it do different things? And the process became more important than the outcome. And occasionally you turn out a masterpiece, and occasionally you turn out a piece of crap. That's the pathway of an artist. And I'd love to be an artist in life. I think it's a great way to live.
I like that. And earlier you talked about the testosterone and that feeling you had when it was surging through you because of the steroids. Have you found a way these days to naturally increase your testosterone as you age? You mentioned you're almost 50 years old, and I think a lot of people listening to this, whether they're younger than that, definitely as they're getting older, how do you go about maintaining a healthy level of testosterone?
It's a super great question. In fact, I'm going to be launching a series probably this quarter with some of the best experts on the world on this topic, because it's a topic that I think is crushing the men in civilized countries. Just to give you a perspective, I want to context what I'm going to share with people first. Today, the average 20-year-old has the testosterone levels of a 70-year-old man in the 1970s. Think about that for a second. Right? Now, why is that? Well, part of it is xenoestrogens, the use of plastics that are disrupting hormonal cycle and causing an advent and production of estrogen. The second part is extremely high levels of cortisol due to looking into screens all the time, blue light stimulation, electromagnetic pollution, lack of exercise in fitness, and I'd say a dysregulation of the natural um, aptitudes and behaviors of men throughout history. And that's oftentimes cultured as toxic masculinity, which I think is a very damaging and ineffective label that has been applied ubiquitously to men today. And I don't think it's doing men any service. And I don't think it's doing women any service either. I think that we have to navigate the world of that. And that pressure has altered how men behave. And some of those alterations, let's face it, are good. They're positive, to be more aware, to be more conscientious, dealing with other women. But there has been a removal of quote unquote men being men, or men being around men, or men supporting men in environments that are only men oriented. And I think there is an importance in the difference in the sexes and the groups that they contribute, and the understandings and relationships they develop. And I think that's a big part of it. But then we have all these toxic chemicals that are contributing. So I'll give you a real example. Most of the biohackers I know and most of the internet marketers I know are using testosterone replacement therapy. Many of these guys started in their early to mid 30s and moving forward. They don't talk about it in their diets, they don't advertise it. And I'm one of the few that doesn't. I'm not saying that as a badge of honor. I'm saying it that I believe that TRT in hormone therapy, bioidentical hormones and stuff, is a great therapy and should be used as the final resort. Because once you enter into that game, you can't go back. Once you're not going to be able to recover from it. So you want to align as many of the factors to maximize your your optimal level of hormones beforehand. Then when it gets to the point where there's no other resort, when you do go in that route, you're going to get better results, and you're going to be able to maintain those results for a longer period of time. Usually 20, 30 years is typically where people seem to be able to handle exogenous hormone manipulation until they crash and burn. That's what I've noticed from the bodybuilding community. And TRT is not the same as taking anabolics for athletic performance. It's a very big difference. So a few years ago, I was running three different companies. I was using stimulants to keep myself up, lots of caffeine and nootropics and things like that. It was a lot of nervous system burners. I was under a very stressful business situation with a partner that was keeping me up late. My sleep cycles were dysregulated. I was living in a foreign country, which was having trouble integration. I was in my house a lot of the time. And I got into a very high cortisol state, so much that my brain didn't operate properly. My cortisol levels were through the roof. I was also dieting. I was into a very low body fat level. I was training in the morning, running on a treadmill, working out in the afternoon, staying on a calorie restricted diet, working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did that for about 2 years and was living in hell. And so I had to pull back. Again, extreme nature. So I had to drop one of the businesses. I had my brain tested. I was getting no electrical energy in my brain. My cortisol levels were through the roof. My magnesium levels had crashed because I had exhausted all my magnesium reserves. I was trying to address my cortisol issue, and my testosterone levels were in the toilet. It was around 200. And that's where people would do testosterone replacement therapy. So I worked with uh, doctor, a naturopathic doctor who had expertise in that area. And I was like, okay, what do you need to get to? And I said, he's like, you probably should think about testosterone replacement. I said, well, let me address the magnesium deficiency, got some B12 stuff. Let me change my lifestyle around here. Let me get off my computer a little bit more. Let me cut one of these businesses that cuts the stress. Let's move back to a place which is more holistic. Let's take some rest time, and let's make all these adjustments. We developed a magnesium product out of that, which turned out to be great, which really helped. I took super physiological doses of magnesium to get my nervous system back re-regulated so I could sleep better and relax more and not be so stressed out and have that cortisol response. And right now, that's a few years later, I've got my testosterone levels to just under 600 naturally. And so, and that's, it's rise up. And I certainly feel a lot better than they did. Drive, energy, sense of well-being, mood, performance, muscularity, all of those things have improved concordantly with that process. I feel awesome. I'm shooting to get into that 800 to 1,000. The sweet spot for a man is in that 800 to 1,000 level. That's where you'd love to be at. And so I'm not there yet. So I've been engaging in a series of experiments continuously to get to that point. And we've got one more series coming over the next that we're going to experiment over. Right now I'm in the middle of a testing series to kind of knock out every single factor: heavy metal, uh, GI tract testing, blood sugar regulation testing, hormonal. Like I'm doing this whole array to knock out every single possible factor inside of this. And then I've got a really awesome set of uh, herbal extracts, which I'm going to leverage next. I'm going to see how high I can get it there. And then I think I can get it up into that 800 zone, certainly over 600 and maybe 700 and up and over to 800 without any of those things. And I'm going to keep it there as long as I can. And then when I drop off eventually, which will happen as I age, then I can use my testosterone replacement therapy sometime after 50. So my deadline to hit it was 50. I said, okay, if I can't hit it by 50, then I go that way. But we've reversed the trend so that we're trending in the right direction. We'll see what happens. So you'll have to ask me in about 18 months. I'm literally a year and just over a year away from my 50th birthday. So that will be the testing point. If I hit 50 and I'm not at that level, it's like, okay,
Do you think going from 600 to 800 to 1,000, you'll feel a subjective difference in your
yeah,
day-to-day well-being?
yes. 100%. Where particularly you notice it is recovery from training. So, for example, I work with a guy. Um, he's around my age. He's at the highest level of success in the world. He's a fairly famous person, and he's got a testosterone level up over the 800s, and his capacity to train and recover and his on it in business and where he's at is truly exceptional. And all his friends are on TRT and anabolics, and they were like, hey, man, if you want to hit these physique goals, you need to do this. And I sat him down and I said, look, yeah, you can gain 10 pounds of muscle, 15 pounds of muscle. You want to go over that? I said, but you're in the sweet spot for your age. Why not play the long game? Why not see how long you can maintain that? Then if you need it at 55 or at 60 years old, you got another 20, 30 years of run where you're going to be in that sweet for like play the long game on this one. And, he's taken that advice and we've worked on him. And right now we've been working with this individual for just over a year. And last year, just was before we started, he had a skiing accident where he shattered his leg. And they said it was going to be so long for him to come back. Well, this year, not only is he recovered, he's back. He's more muscular. He's leaner than he's ever been. He's training harder than he's ever been. He's killing it in his business. He feels amazing. And he said he's never felt better in his life. And I don't know what would have happened had we gone down the testosterone replacement therapy mode or the anabolic road. And those are two derivatives of the same function. But he's happy that he held off.
You mentioned the herbs there and that being a later stage experiment you're going to get into. For people that maybe they're getting close to thinking about going on, hormone replacement therapy, what are some of those herbs people could look into and try before they get there?
Yeah. Well, well, I'm going to caveat this a little bit because the problem there's two main problems when you're referring to herbal extracts in order to enhance hormonal optimization. So when you're looking at enhancing testosterone, and there's two things. You want to change your testosterone to estrogen ratio and get them in an optimal zone. And part of that's lowering cortisol. It's creating testosterone enhancing, and then as you come down the derivatives of DHEA, and then it splits, and then it splits, and it splits into these derivatives, and it can go down an estrogenic pathway, and it go down an anabolic pathway. And for me, I produce lots of DHEA, and I'm going to caveat your under because I wanted to talk about the endocrine stuff without getting too detailed. But for me, I had high levels of DHEA, but when it was going through its conversion process, it was going down an estrogenic pathway instead of a testosterone based pathway. And part of the issue was the conversion using zinc I needed to up my zinc and selenium levels, which aided in the conversion. Instead of it going estrogenization over, it went over to the anabolic testosterone production. The second thing that I had to do is I had to suppress my cortisol levels. So I had to go off coffee for a year, right? And then I supplement, and I noticed I was depleting my magnesium. So I super supplemented with magnesium levels, which calmed down my nervous system in concordant with dropping my caffeine hits and reducing my workload so that I offset my cortisol. So a lot of people will look at this and say, I just want testosterone benefits, or I just want to drop estrogens or whatever. And they don't work independently. And this is why you need expertise to manage those things. And that's one of the problems when people look at herbal concoctions. They say, oh, I can take Tongkat Ali, and that's going to increase my testosterone levels. Well, maybe. You might find that if you're low in essential fatty acids, that you can add essential fatty acids, and that's going to increase your testosterone level. You might find that if you're low in zinc, that you increase zinc and you have higher testosterone levels. You might find if you drop caffeine out of your life, your cortisol levels will drop, or you cut your screen time on blue light. So there is why I'm going to do this series, is because I want to create a systematized approach of, here are all the factors that are pushing down your testosterone. Here are all the factors that are increasing your estrogen. Here are all the factors that are affecting your cortisol levels. And here are all the factors that are letting your sleep. And here are all your vitamins and mineral deficiencies that are present, and your essential fatty acid deficiency, and your dietary. Now we've got the full picture. And a person can systematically go down each one of these lists, knock off these, increase these, decrease these, focus on these, and looking at the self holistically, as opposed to just throwing some hormones on top of what you didn't figure out in the first place. Because the thing about if when you increase your testosterone levels, okay, or any hormone level, hormones accelerate metabolic processes. Okay? So if your body has downregulated hormones in your body, there's a reason for it. There's some process in your body that's not operating the way it should be. And if I just throw hormones on top of it, like testosterone and growth hormone and these things, which are very common inside of the longevity performance-based society, without addressing the fundamental nutritional flaws and lifestyle flaws in my system, all I'm just putting more horsepower in the dragster. I'm just going to get to the crash point in the turn in the road where I'm not going to make the turn. So I'm going to get there faster. I need to change the handling system in the car first before I up the engine power. And so turn my dragster into a performance car so I can handle the curves of life. And so it's a balance between absolute raw power with refinement of the elements that get there. And so I'm working with a world-class chemist. I literally have the concoctions sitting here in my fridge right now at this moment, which is a vast array of extracts that are all combined uniquely in a unique formula in order to do that testing. But I'm not engaging in that. It's been sitting in my fridge for 2 months because I'm not complete all of the things that I've done at this point to make sure I've covered all my bases. And then I'm going to do this interview series with experts in those areas to address all the points that I don't know, because there's areas that I've got holes in. I'll address those. And once I've done all that, I'll retest again. And then it's like, okay, now I'm ready to go try that one. And then I can get a legitimate result of the absolute aspects of that. But most often, to answer your question specifically, DHEA, that's the precursor. High levels of zinc, I think for most people is a good thing. It's 30 milligrams a day. You can get that tested. You can do a SpectraCell test. High levels of magnesium. Limit your screen time. Make sure that you get lots of sleep. Then you can get into things like Tongkat Ali, Tribulus terrestris, usually are good. And then there's a whole cornucopia of things that kind of go down from that. Some of them I won't reveal because I think a lot of people don't know about them, so I'm going to keep that off the radar until we get finished. But I think most people would do better addressing these other areas first before they go down TRT.
That makes a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And Wade, before I let you go, I want to talk about your transition as a fellow Canadian from Canada down to the US. Talk about how you ended up getting down there and getting settled in a new country.
Well, it starts where we began our talk. So when I was 15 years old and read Education of a Bodybuilder from Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was living in Gold's Gym was in Venice Beach, California. He was the number one movie star in the world and is living the dream. And I used to come out of the garage training in my snowmobile suit, and I would come into my parents and like, why are you training and it's 30 below out in the garage? And I said, because one day I am going to live in Venice Beach, California. I'm going to compete in the Mr. Universe contest, and I'm going to have a nutritional supplement company that's going to help people all over the world. That's why I'm doing this. And so, and I've lived all over the world, and I've been grateful to do that. My home base eventually was in Vancouver for many, many years, a couple of decades, and in between my stints in Asia and Central America and Europe and things like that. And the opportunity came because of the success of my company to move to the United States to kind of scale it up and these type of things. And if one of my former clients helped me made the legal visa applications, my company became to a point where the United States welcomed me in because I was investing, creating jobs and people and doing business here. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so I moved down here to Venice Beach and I got to train at Gold's Gym. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is literally at the gym next to me in the morning. And my supplement company happened. I competed in the Mystery Universe and I was like, oh, wow, I've lived in the dream. And then COVID hit. That all got screwed up. But I created the bio home here. I got I call it 4 stories of glory. I've got my studio here. I got a gym on the roof. People come over. We do lots of recordings. It's a lot of fun. And so it's been a great journey, and who knows where it ends or where it goes. But we're here now, and we're loving it. And I'm enjoying Southern California. And this morning, I'm up on my deck, and the sun's coming up over the palm trees. I took a little picture and put it on my Facebook and said, "Good morning, California. It's 33 years to get here."
Wow, I love that story. So happy for you. And how long have you been a resident now?
Well, I came here in basically January of last year. I had 2 weeks, 2 months. COVID hit. I went to Arizona to one of my favorite places in the world, Sedona, for 3 months until they opened up the gym and I came back here, moved residences again in Venice because my other place got basically the neighborhood was destroyed from the homeless situation. Found my dream place here serendipitously and moved in here. And so if it wasn't for COVID, I wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't for California, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for the Mr. Universe, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for BiOptimizers, I wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't for my dream as a 15-year-old, I wouldn't be here. So I don't know how I got here, but I'm here.
Well, congrats to you. I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you ever get back to New Brunswick? Is that a place that you travel to frequently?
Yeah. Well, I go home for Christmas every single year. I have never missed a Christmas with my parents any year. My sister died, of course, at Christmas time. So I always make sure that I'm there before that. And we hold a special celebration of life on the 21st every year. On the So it's always a special place. It's always and it's a my parents are very lucky. I've got two parents that are still together. They're up in their 70s and they're wonderful, salt of the earth, very simple people living a very quiet lifestyle. And I go back there as a reminder to the important things in life, and also as a reminder is it's a long ways from where I am. I'm a little bit concerned because I went in the Christmas holidays and had to go through um, the isolation period for a couple weeks. And, I was greeted at the airport with people in combat gear with bulletproof vests, and it seemed a little excessive. And, the police come to check on my house, well, to make sure I was there. And I was like, I don't know. And so I made it a pact that I went on that trip and I went to Toronto and I went to Vancouver to see all my friends in those cities. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to get back because, you know, um, I have deep concerns about this untested vaccine and the long-term replicate potential replications. It's using mRNA materials that's never been used in a vaccine before. And there's been no long-term trials. We don't have a vaccine for AIDS. We don't have a vaccine for the avian flu. And suddenly we have all these different options with a vaccine for the current things. And um, perverse incentives being something that has warped people forever, I have deep concerns about the potential consequences. So if they make it so that you can't travel because you don't have a vaccine and that sort of stuff, I'm going to have to suffer it out for a while and see what happens. I'm going to sit on the sidelines and see if there's any contraindications or unplanned consequences for this. But I think it doesn't make sense to roll something out so quickly in widespread use with the current situation. And as a health advocate, I don't think it's right for me to. Everybody does whatever they want, but for my own self, I don't think that all these people have my best interest in health. I think they have best interest in their own agendas, which aren't the same as mine.
Well, Wade, I really love this conversation. Thank you for sharing your story, being so open and vulnerable. And I know our listeners, if they want to go check out BiOptimizers, you're offering 10% discount on the entire line, and they can get there by they can go to bioptimizers.com/ultimate health or just use the code ultimate health at checkout. And other than them checking out your incredible lineup of products, how can they connect with you after the show?
Yeah. So if they go there, I'll invite them to download the Awesome Health course. It's a free 12-week course, 5 to 15 minute videos that they can get. It's my whole philosophy. I always say you can't supplement your way out of a bad lifestyle. So apply the lifestyle principles I learned. Avoid all the stupid mistakes that I've made. Do that. They can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all those things. We do IG lives. I have an Awesome Health podcast. All that sort of stuff's available on the site. But more importantly, I think if they want to connect with me, connect with the spirit, and that is to take health into your own hands, get expertise to provide specific advice to you, the N of one, the only thing that you have control over, and continue adjusting and adapting. Don't become attached to any dietary philosophy. Don't become attached to any tribalistic mentality. Um, it's always good to have community, but don't be limited by it. And to make your own, put your own course in life, and be willing to course correct. I hope that I'm wrong in many of my thoughts and beliefs. There's nobody that I think it's a great thing to discover when you're wrong, but I think it's also a great thing to take a bold stand and go the course of your life. We all end up in the same place in the end. So the quality of the life that you live at the time we have, I think, is more important than anything else. And why not enjoy it?
All right, Wade, I'm going to link everything up in the show notes, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Great questions, by the way. I really appreciate them. We went to places I haven't done in my interview, so thanks you. Thanks for that, Jesse.
It was fun. Thank you.